let's talk about Sarah's Law for the next few minutes. If you want to know if someone who has contact with your child has been convicted or suspected of child abuse, then you can find out from today. The Child Sex Offender Disclosure Scheme, also known as Sarah's Law, is being rolled out in Wiltshire after being tested in 4 UK police forces. Hampshire is already using the scheme. DCI Mark Ashthorpe is from Hampshire Police, and he believes it can really help parents.
The public has a misunderstanding around how sexual offenders operate. Roy Whiting and people who prey on children, stranger attacks on children, are exceptionally rare. The vast majority of sexual offending against children is by people within a family setup, people who are known to the children, known to the parents. Offenders will typically groom parents, will typically be good friends with parents or related to the family.
So that was, DCI Mark Ashthorpe from Hampshire Police explaining how these things can come about. What effects, though, does this have on offenders who have served their time and are settling back into the community? Chris Bath is from the National Ex-Offenders Association, Unlock, and he joins us now. Hello, Chris.
Hi.
You have some reservations about Sarah's Law, don't you?
I think it could turn out to be a bit of an expensive waste of time. I think on the face of it, I can see why people find it attractive, but if you look at actually the evidence of the pilots that were done, a lot of people actually felt really trapped by the information they were given, because actually, you know, what if you say, for instance, if you were given information that somebody had this kind of criminal record, you may be given it, but you cannot pass it on to your loved ones, your family, your friends in the area, and if you do, you'll be committing a criminal act, so you'll be an offender yourself.
There are ways around that, though, aren't there? I mean, you know, if you know you're at the school gate and people have spoken about somebody, you know, there would be ways around that. You could suggest to other people that they ought to put the same request in, for example.
Well, precisely. I mean, that's exactly the case. The idea of the pilots and what the rules are supposed to be is that in very, very, very strict, specific situations, people might be given this information. In fact, those powers are already with the police and with probation before this kind of slightly politicised way of approaching things existed. So that's in a sense the concern, that people will find ways around it. They'll pass the information on, and of course potentially could be prosecuted. But I think what people tend to forget is, because they're focusing on very, very, very unusual and very severe offences here, there are 8 million people in this country with a criminal record. So you need to be a little bit careful what you wish for, because the government has a tendency to to start with a small pilot and roll out to something a little bit more worrying.
Yeah, not necessarily, though, do they? I mean, this is we've been pretty specific about what this is, and it's stayed as a pretty specific thing, and it is a particular type of crime that people feel especially uncomfortable with.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because actually in the original pilot it was only set up to give information to parents and carers, and by the end of the pilot it actually became anybody with a concern. So if something as extreme as that can happen just during a pilot phase, I would be slightly concerned, of course. And again, this is being marketed as if it's just about people with convictions for sexual offences, and it actually includes people with histories of violence as well. So, you know, if you start to talk about maybe having had a history of smacking your child, and, you know, that being recorded as assault, for instance, then that is violence against a child, and therefore that sort of information would be disclosed.
But, I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because anyone who has a child will want to do the best they can to protect that child, and will say that you're misguided in sounding as though you're more concerned about the ex-offender than you are about a potential victim. I mean, no. Are you suggesting that these offenders, you know, once they've been rehabilitated, don't pose any risk to society? Should they be able to hide behind anonymity?
It's absolutely possible that people can be rehabilitated. That doesn't mean that everybody will be rehabilitated. My concern is not so much, offender versus victim. My concern is, of course, these sorts of offences have to be absolutely stopped. So if you've got resources to do that, where's the best place to put them? And I think we're being played a trick on here, because actually what they're doing is delegating responsibility for safety down to parents, and actually that money's better spent on probation officers, social workers, education, rather than a scheme by which sort of, you know, delegates responsibility. One thing I always think is, if you had such a concern over an individual you knew, that you actually wanted to go to the police to ask whether they had any convictions, if the police then told you, no, this person's got no previous convictions, would you then go, oh, well, that's okay, the police have told me they haven't got any previous convictions, now I'm totally comfortable to leave my child alone with them? Sometimes I think we can go back to rely on our own instincts without having to necessarily rely on the police to tell us about convictions.
But unfortunately, once someone has committed that kind of crime, rehabilitated or not, there will always be a stigma, won't there? People will say, if somebody's committed a crime against a child, people will think they are a certain kind of person. Only a certain kind of person would do that. So if somebody has suspicions and finds them to be correct, then surely that's got to be a good thing. Surely it's got to be a good form of protection for children.
I think you have to think about the long-term consequences of these things. What happens when this information is passed around willy-nilly? There's already an existing system whereby the authorities who have the responsibility, if somebody is a genuine risk, the authorities have a responsibility to deal with that person. If they're a genuine danger to children in their community, perhaps they're not in the best position, being in the community. If they're if they're a very high-level risk. And of course, if people are lower risk and are fine to be in the community, and this information is passed around, you then get into a situation where you have a ghettoisation, where people can't live in the community, where they are forced to all live together and share a kind of community which is not the sort of community that we want going on.
Okay, Chris, thanks for your time. Good to talk to you on the programme this afternoon. Chris Bath talking to me a little bit about those thoughts. That very difficult issue of Sarah's Law. Chris Bath from Unlock, which is a charity which deals with ex-offenders.